We are live.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Top of the morning to you, Mom.
How are you?
Doing okay.
Doing a nice quiet morning?
Yeah,
It's early for you.
a little bit, but it's 9 o'clock. I've been up since before 7.
Oh, really?
It's the cool of the day. It's supposed to be 88 today. 91 and 95 is what it's been.
We're going to be cool today. I think we're going to have a high of 79.
We're at 73 right now.
73 is tolerable. Nice comfortable
Oh, yeah.
temperature.
Quite.
All right, we've got somebody watching from California again. Sunnyvale. Nice. Made some peach tea this morning.
Morning, Top Dad.
Hey, morning.
He always loved the Top Gun movie. In fact, we put Danger Zone as his ringtone on his cell phone. And he loves the Maverick movie. We've watched it, what, 10 times now?
I think 6. Maybe
Dedication.
5. Maybe 5.
Dedication.
Y'all have a good week.
It's been a slow week. It's been getting things done.
We were fasting during the week, and that always leaves you a little draggy,
Yeah, exactly.
dragging out a little bit when you're fasting. So
Also seemed to impact our sleep cycles.
Mm.
We didn't sleep more than an hour or two at a time, kept waking up. Not really sure what that was from, but it was not a nice experience.
Been very hot late into the night here, so it's been very difficult to get a good solid sleep. So usually sleep, from 2 to 7, where it's the coolest time of the day.
Yeah, we don't have air conditioning here, but it's been blessedly cool. We've been down around 65 overnight,
Mm.
so it's good sleeping weather.
Yeah,
We just
exactly.
couldn't sleep.
Yeah. How are you, Debbie?
I'm good. How are you, Susan?
I'm doing all right. Doing all
You
right.
still dog sitting?
No, I just got back last night. Rather late. I'm kind of on the groggy side, so excuse my appearance. I'm just still in my pajamas.
Nobody would know if you didn't tell us.
nice advantage of just streaming.
It's the home church advantage.
Yeah, no
You don't
church
have to
advantage.
get dressed up and impress anybody.
Yeah.
How was your week?
It was very, very boring. The dogs were they were fun. They had a couple issues, but they were fun. It was okay. But I didn't take my car, so I was completely stuck. So it was okay.
How's Harmony doing?
She's doing okay. She was supposed to come down last week, but then when I got that call to the dog sit, and then hopefully I'll get to see her this week.
It's been a productive week. We've got a lot of little things taken care of. It's been a little here and a little there.
Routine maintenance. We worked out the details to rent out one of the apartments. So
Yeah, that worked. Usually there's such a
Yeah.
shortage of rentals here that usually when we put up an ad for the apartments, one of the apartments being vacant, we're inundated. And this time we only had a few. This time we only had a couple of people inquiring, and they weren't a good fit because we had put in the ad small pet, singular, considered. So I'm sorry, that doesn't include a 40-pound chow. That doesn't include 5 cats with their own litter boxes.
Oh, yeah.
And 2 ferrets, plus a 10-year-old dog.
Wow.
we finally changed the ad. Absolutely no dogs. We've got 2 tenants that have dogs, and I just don't want the risk of fights and
More.
tensions and things like that.
Or damage.
Plus they can be very destructive on the interior of a house.
Exactly.
But
Morning,
it turned
Scott.
out that one of our tenants has a kind of a family member who has been in a rehab center. She's had a lot of health issues and had one leg amputated.
Oh,
And
All
so
over
she's
the-
had a tough year, and she needed a place to move to.
Actually a nurse,
She's a
retired
retired nurse.
nurse. So they just,
So it all kicked in time for their moving in this weekend.
good.
All things considered, the Lord had a plan. I kept saying, it's so unusual. I mean, usually we would have 15 or 20 people. And
Wow.
most of them, were just inquiries. They weren't really serious.
Yep.
Or the family with 6 kids that needed a place because they're living in their car. Sorry, but a 2-bedroom apartment is not a good fit.
sounds good.
Scott, you got somebody visiting you today?
Well, yes, we have our granddaughter here over the weekend.
Oh, you ought to let us see her.
She's want me to keep staying with her. We just got done
Aw.
playing hide and seek.
Oh, they never get tired of that, Scott.
Right, yeah. And
We
we
created a monster.
played with blocks and everything.
Oh, Scott's
Yeah.
enjoying his second
Oh,
childhood.
let's see.
Okay, well, it's 12 o'clock. We ought to go ahead and get started, at least recording.
All right.
Hello.
Oh, there
Oh,
she is.
she's adorable.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
What a cutie pie.
Oh, you're fine. Say you're fine. Talk to him.
Wow, you're as big as Mount Sinai.
Hello, how old are you?
Wow, she looks like she's
Are you 2?
maybe a year and a half.
Say 3. I'm 3.
3?
Three.
Oh, she's a big girl.
Oh, Cat got her tongue, I think.
Ah,
Well, she's
She's
busy
kind of
looking at her,
mesmerized
she's
by the
looking at
whole
herself.
experience here.
She sees herself on the screen.
Yeah, she's kind of mesmerized by that right now.
Yeah, our little granddaughter is so used to having mommy video her that whenever it's on, she's smiling for the cameras, looking at her picture. Hello,
Wait a minute, buddy.
you got your blankie, huh?
Wait.
hi. Hi, what's your name?
Say your name. Say your name. You're being
What do we
bashful.
call you?
Let's just call her Cutie Pie. Is Cutie Pie a good name?
Yeah. Yeah, it's Reagan. Yeah.
Oh,
Reagan.
and at 3, they know everything. It makes them so much fun.
Yeah. All right, well, before Elijah's going to be leading out this morning, and
He's not here yet.
hasn't pulled in yet, so we can go ahead and have prayer, and I can do my little
Ramble.
ramble time. So let me invite you just to pause, and we'll go to the Lord. Father in heaven, thank you so much for the blessings of life and for watching over us yet another week, giving us the opportunity to come together as a church family and to praise you for who you are. And thank you for your very many blessings to us. You put in place a wonderful master plan to save humanity. And we are so grateful that we've had opportunity to consider that plan, to study that plan, and to share that plan with others. And so we're thankful, Lord, that it is all sufficient. And we just relish in the multitude of promises that your book reveals. And we pray that as we open it up today, that same spirit that inspired men of old long ago will be here to impress us, to inspire us, to teach us. We need your guidance. We need your leadership, Lord, as we approach these very critical days, the very last days of probationary history. So guide and direct us to that end. We pray that every person that will be a part of this program or will see it afterwards will be blessed with your Sabbath blessing. And we thank you for all of this. In Jesus' wonderful name and for his sake. Amen. and Amen. Okay. I don't know if any of you have heard of Miriam Grossman. Miriam Grossman is the author of a book. I think she is a psychologist. She just wrote a book called Lost in Trans Nation. And I heard a couple of surveys that were done recently at different universities. And some of the university students are indicating that they now consider themselves a part of the trans community. One university, I think it was like 38% of the student body. So it's become kind of a not necessarily a tradition, but what do they call it? A thing that I forget the word now. That young people, they want to just be part of it. Somebody will mention the word here in a minute, but it's become quite the thing that young people want to be a part of.
Yeah, popular culture.
A trend. It's become very trendy. That's the word I was looking for. I knew it began with a T. I was thinking tradition.
You know, it started with that whole concept of victimhood. You know, I'm a victim of this. My ancestors were slaves. My ancestors were poor. All of these things affected how I am. Now we've got this whole thing. God made me different. Because I'm different, I need to be a special protected class.
Right. Now, I think this is part of the signs of the times, an indication of the signs of the times that we're living in. There's no question that the minds of the young, particularly, have been taken captive in regards to this trendy type of thing. I remember growing up back in the 60s. It was trendy to have long hair. It was trendy to wear, kind of psychedelic type of things. In fact, we're kind of going back to that now. We're kind of coming back around to that with our hippie haven upstairs and our lots of bright colors and whatnot.
That culture was all about peace and love.
Yeah, peace and love. We're kind of like that,
We decided to do this third floor. We've been doing everything in the rest of the house in kind of country farmhouse. But the third floor is an attic that was rehabbed into a master bedroom, office, and bath, and a little kitchenette. So it could be its own little apartment, except it's on the third floor in our house. So we did all the decor in a hippie theme, colors. And they couldn't get the beaded curtains, but we got the streamer curtains in different colors. And
anyway,
that
a very positive. When we take people up there to visit, they really puts a smile on their faces. They feel, what was Barbara saying?
you say it makes you feel creative and alive.
Energetic and alive. You just
A lot of light up there, the skylights, and it just makes you feel, one wall is a daffodil yellow and the other side is a
lime green.
lime green.
Oh, geez, I can imagine.
I'll have to send you some pictures. It's really cool.
Yeah. It's our happy place for sure.
But it is, color,
Yeah.
color has frequency and color does help with healing.
Yeah. At any rate, it's become kind of trendy over the last decade, I would say, at least, to question who you are. The Bible is supposed to lead you, and God's Spirit, of course, does this, leads you to ask those four main questions in life, right? Who am I? Where did I come from? How did we get here? And where are we going? And the Bible tends to, through the Holy Spirit, bring you to that place where you ask that question, who am I? Well, the school system and academia has attempted to answer that question by saying, you probably don't need to be sure who you are, right? So they've gone from that. Now, as I thought about this question that Miriam Grossman posed, she said, you may have been born in the wrong body. That's the question that's been coming to our kids for. Now she's exposing this. Okay, she's not in favor of it. Her book is exposing this. Lost in the Trans Nation. But the question that people have been asking, academia has been asking these kids, is you may have been born in the wrong body. As I thought about that, I thought, well, let me go back over history And let's start with Adam himself. For the first 930 years, nobody could ask that question, because Adam would tell you himself, I was the first man. I was made in the, I was a clump of dust, and God breathed into my body the breath of life, and I became a living being, right? So for the first 930 years, which is how long he lived, that's probably, I don't know if we could say that's probably after sin. The clock probably didn't start ticking until notably anyway, until after they rebelled. So they may have been, that's why I believe they were in the garden for 6 years before that time, because you can calculate 956 years from the time of Adam to the time of the flood. But at any rate, I digress there. So for that period of time, which is about 1/6 of this world's history thus far, you couldn't even ask that question, because Adam would be foremost in telling you, hey, I was the first man created, made in the image of God after his likeness. You know, Adam and Eve, you know, when God created this beautiful world, on the 6th day, he creates Adam and Eve, as all of you know. And Adam and Eve were like an artist will sign a painting, right? We got all these paintings around where people have signed them, you know, Da Vinci, Rembrandt, all that. Adam and Eve were the living signature of God on this beautiful created world that he had created. And so when you come forward, even up to the time of the flood, you would have been hard pressed to ask that question, because what was still around, even though Adam had died after 930 years, another 700 years into the future, there was still a tremendous witness of their beginning. And what was that?
Creation.
It was their home, the Garden of Eden. You could go over to the garden and you could see the angel guarding the entrance. So you had Adam for 930 years, and then for another 700 plus years, you had their garden home that was being guarded because the tree of life was in there. So, and then of course the flood occurs, and the population of the world is diminished to 8 souls, Noah and his family. So still that question about who you are and how you got here, really what didn't find a lodging place, even after the flood, after the first dispensation, which I would call the Adamic dispensation, the first 2,000 years from Adam to Noah. They knew firsthand that humanity had been created in the image of God, but they quickly perverted it, right? Not quickly, but over the course of the first 2,000 years, they perverted that image of God in them to the point where they decided, and this is where we are today, I believe, decided that they could themselves, they had the technology and the ability and the wherewithal to make themselves gods. Okay. And so they were experimenting with amalgamation and doing all kinds of things of that nature pre-flood. And this is why God had to step in. They had crossed several lines where they were endeavoring to try to be God himself. And that's where we've come today. The Bible tells us, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be when the Son of Man returns.
You know, I think there have always been people who were confused, you know, as sin engulfed the world. I'm sure there were people that have been confused about their sexuality. And I know there have always been people who pretended, who put on clothes and dressed up like the other sex. But everybody knew they were pretending.
Yeah, I think that's a modern day phenomenon.
And now we're getting to the place where they think, oh, with surgery and hormones, you can actually be the other gender.
To create that confusion is to negate the word that says you're fearfully and wonderfully made. So,
Right.
so that lack of identity, that confusion, that chaos is by design.
She found the seed, say.
All right, so for the first third of this world's history, I don't even think you could ask that question that is posed there. And I think for the Jewish dispensation, of course, we're more privy to the development of the Jewish nation, because that was the main aspect of spiritual development from God's word anyway, from Genesis 12 on. And so you had the sanctuary, you had the development of Israel, the 12 tribes. Of course, you had 12 Islamic tribes as well. And so all along the way, I think Satan has been trying to argue the case that humanity, we have to question whether we're made in the image of God after the likeness of God. Okay, we have to question that. And so what that ultimately means is that God is the ultimate authority, and he has the one to determine what biological sex you are at birth. The Bible tells us that he knew us before we were conceived. So the fact is, out of 500 million possibilities, God chose each person. And like Rose is saying, I think a contemporary concept might be that people are asking certain questions as they grow up and so forth. Certainly from a cultural standpoint, and I don't think that existed so much in the first two dispensations, but maybe in this third more fully. You have people dressing differently. I don't think that was an issue in the first two dispensations. You had men wearing, like Jesus, his undergarment, his garment was a one-piece tunic, right? Like a dress, right? So you didn't have, so the men and the women both wore dresses in a sense. And maybe the thing that distinguished it between the male and the female was the beard and that kind of thing.
I'm sure clothing had different elements of, femininity or masculinity to, because it's
Well, I
not
don't think that occurred until you get into the last 2,000 years.
really.
Yeah.
You think everybody just wore the same plain?
I think,
t-shirt,
well, yeah, I don't think you had, I
you
think,
don't think women were like stitching little flower patterns on theirs?
I don't know if they'd have been, I think people were too practical back then for that kind of stuff.
I don't think I feel like women have been
Unnecessary.
fundamentally the same throughout the, you,
Well, no,
you
they're
buy
gonna-
a house, right?
Their hair's gonna be longer, their skin is
You
gonna
see all
be
these things sitting on this
softer.
mantle,
There are distinctions between men and women, most
Right.
notably, the length of hair typically, the softness of the skin, the development of the breast and that kind of thing. So there are major distinctions that are obvious. But I think it's only been in this the last couple hundred years that people are asking this.
I think it depends on what you have access to.
This is the question. You may have been born in the wrong body. That's the question that
Oh,
was
gotcha.
posed. Okay. So the fact is, Satan has always been trying to distance humanity from their maker.
Right.
When we say
You come from a monkey.
when we say who am I? Well, yeah, that in this
That's part of
dispensation,
it.
the whole evolutionary thing developed in the 1800s.
Well, at least developed
1800s.
more anyways.
1800s, right.
It's been a theory ever since the Greeks as well.
Yeah, developed more fully in the 1800s. So yeah, who am I? Where did I come from? Okay, what's the origin of our existence? When you step away from the Bible, really anything goes. Really,
Right.
and probably some of you have heard some really concocted crazy ideas.
And if you want to be
step away
fair,
from
when you
Scripture-
step away from anything that is considered a standard, whether you wanted to come at it from a strictly biblical view, which of course is what we're doing, but I just mean in general, anytime you remove God from the picture, all bets are off.
all bets are off. Exactly.
Because reality can be anything.
Yeah.
The
The important thing is, that's the wrong question that the kids should be asked. The real question that they should be asked is, what is God's plan for you?
What purpose do you serve in the body?
What purpose? What's your purpose? What purpose? Why did God call you? There's a unique purpose that he called you. Out of 500 million possibilities, God selected each individual. So you weren't an accident. You weren't a happenstance. You weren't just a lucky racer. You won the first race you ever won because God chose you.
And the odds are actually even greater than 500 million because the egg is different every cycle as well too.
Yeah.
So it's like, you'd have to factor in the lifetime of a
The
woman's
numbers, yeah, menstrual
ovulation.
cycles.
Well, and women have several million eggs,
Right,
you know,
potentially.
potentially.
Yeah.
They don't even use them all, if I'm not mistaken, but it's
Yeah.
kind of an interesting premise.
At any rate, I thought that, since this has become such a broad issue and, people are now getting offended because of using the wrong pronouns and this kind of thing. And
In a language that's
And,
already a construct of man.
right, but you can tell society, at least the Western society here, isn't really buying it. When companies promote transgender issues and so forth, those companies suffer tremendously and immediately. So you have a segment of society that's saying, no, we're not going to go there. We're not going to cross that line. But because we are at that line, I think it's
Well, you'll see that sentiment shift within the next generation or two.
ultimately where they want to take it is that you're not male or you're not female, but you're a machine.
Most
We
people,
want to make you a machine.
I think my generation, my particular age group, seems to be one of the last that kind of is transitioning over into that thinking. I think Simeon's generation and on seems pretty on board with it because of the
Yeah.
education system.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's taking us to a place that will establish. I mean, obviously, God knew from a timing standpoint that we would run a course nearly 6,000 years in duration before we again came back around to the time of Noah. And there are people out there now saying we can have eternal life apart from God. Without God, we can have eternal life. We can upload our minds into the cloud. We can make a new body. We can download our mind, and we can just keep doing that over and over and over again, and even get more sophisticated along the way.
Right.
So where we are, but we're just a machine, and our mind is downloaded
Every time the heart's getting weak, just install a new one,
or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to transition now over to our study time, and we're in Genesis chapter 46, and I think we're going to probably be able to go maybe one or two chapters today, because chapter 46 is like one of the chapters that we've read in the past, where it's a family history of who's going down to Egypt. But Elijah said he would go ahead and lead out because my throat was kind of scratchy this week, and I wasn't sure about my voice. So I asked him to come take care of it.
Sure.
So he's going to go ahead and lead out.
Okie doke. So I guess starting in chapter 46, verse 1 there. And Israel took his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices unto the God of his father Isaac. And God spake unto Israel in the visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Here am I. And he said, I am the God of thy father. Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I will there make of thee a great nation.
Wow. Now there you go. There it is right there.
Mhm.
The promise to Abram is going to be fulfilled in a foreign land.
Yeah.
Right. But
Right.
this also to me, and I can feel a tickle in my throat already, but this to me talks about the practicality of God in a sense. God knew that in Canaan, the conditions there, the environmental conditions there were not really ripe to establish a mighty nation, for prolific growth.
Right.
So he has to establish circumstances that will lead them down to a location that will facilitate all of that.
Right.
And it's just interesting that God here is telling Jacob, because remember, Jacob heard it from his dad. His dad heard it from Abram. Abram heard it from God himself. And of course, they also, each of them heard it from God himself. It still hasn't happened. Hundreds of years have gone by and it still hasn't happened.
Right. Hundreds of years, tons of drama, lots of potential family setbacks,
Mhm.
different things where the boys, went and killed a bunch of people and
But all understood and known by God in the process ahead of time.
when the significance of Beersheba as well is pretty interesting. You guys remember what all has happened here before?
He's asking that to everybody, of course.
Yeah, so the forum, yeah, any significance to Beersheba in terms of what's been going on in this history so far?
Yeah, a number of things, of course, that happened there. Go ahead and tell us.
Yeah, well, some of the significances, this is where God has spoken to each of them before.
Right,
So it's the same location where God spoke to Abraham about this promise. Same place God spoke to Isaac about this promise.
maybe that's why Jacob wanted to go there.
I think so.
This is a
And that was kind of what I was leading into with that
Yeah.
question of like, why would he decide on the way to Egypt instead of just going streamline, which it wasn't a far detour. It's kind of on the way.
Right,
But why this detour to Beersheba? It also seems that
isn't,
that he was a bit scared of
isn't
the
Rachel buried there?
Rachel. Maybe no, she's buried in Bethel, I think.
I know, well, I know it's near Bethlehem. I'm not sure the geography there, but
Yeah, I think I think she is buried in Bethel, and Bethel would be north of where they were.
yeah, okay, which is close to Bethlehem.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's
Yeah,
not really a long
if
way.
assuming they were in Hebron, then yeah, Bethel is the opposite direction.
Right,
And so they would have gone to Beersheba and then on their way down to Egypt.
but Isaac also had dealings there in Beersheba, for sure.
Yeah, that's where Abraham had made an oath with Abimelech, and then Isaac did the same.
Mhm.
And the other interesting thing too, I guess, was the offering of the lambs and all the other stuff, because it was Beersheba means well of an oath.
Well, no, right, it's where they, right,
And what was kind of interesting was the word for oath is also the word for seven, which was just to designate like the completion of a week or just seven in general.
right.
I thought that was an interesting correlation between the word oath and the word seven
Nice,
and the number seven. So Abraham had offered or had made the treaty with Abimelech there with 7 ewe lambs.
right, I remember.
And Isaac kind of did the same thing, but instead of offering ewe lambs, had a feast for him, made a deal, and then kind of reaffirmed the name of the place being Beersheba, keeping that concept of the oath of 7 in there. So I thought that was an interesting little tidbit. Among other interesting things that happened here later, let's see. Beersheba was also the portion of the land that's later on divided to Simeon and Judah. And it's also the area where God spoke to Hagar and to Elijah. And so God does a lot of talking here.
Yeah, apparently so.
Something interesting about Beersheba that God really liked. It's also where Samuel's 2 sons corrupted the judgeship and was the thing that prompted Israel to move for wanting a king instead of judges.
Mm,
And later on in Amos, the region is declared as a pagan place of worship, and he encourages people not to go there.
wow.
So
Yeah,
it's interesting to see how the devil seeks to corrupt
sure,
things that God was working with and doing and trying to flip the image
no doubt, always happens.
to a complete point where people just say, you're better off not going there,
Yeah,
even though this is exactly where the patriarchs went.
yeah, I can think of
To
some,
meet with
I can
God.
think of some universities that would fall into that category.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, like the devil has no new ideas, let's say.
Right.
Don't fix what isn't broken. His plans have some.
Yeah, if something
It's working.
special is happening in a certain location, the devil says, hey, I need to get in there and get a foothold so I can corrupt it.
Right. And I guess one of the other interesting questions was, I guess, why Jacob was afraid to, or Israel at this time, why he was afraid to go to Egypt initially, or what his apprehension.
Yeah, it
was.
seems like there's a little apprehension there.
I mean, the fact that he stopped in Beersheba to make this offering and
Right, to maybe get
Inquire of
some
God.
reassurance
yeah,
from God, And of course, that was always his practice. I mean, whenever they wanted to do anything, I can see where their normal practice is to seek out God's will. Because, when you find out hey, your lost son that you thought was dead is there.
And he's in charge.
And he's in charge and he's inviting you down. And by the way, we got 5 more years of famine, so we're not going to be able to survive here anyway.
Right.
But God, what should we do?
Should we stay?
Should we,
Will you provide
know,
for
what,
here?
what should we do? And so I can see where maybe this is not as much fear or apprehension, but maybe we just want to make sure that
This is
looked
what
at.
you really want us to do.
Yeah, so that's a
That we're not being pressured into a situation.
That's a real positive. So he tells him, I'll go down. God tells him, I will go down with thee into Egypt. I will, and I will also surely bring thee up again. And of course, that word bring thee, we know reading on in the story that Jacob was, I think, 130 when he went down,
I don't recall yet.
because he died at 147. So he was in Egypt for 17 years. So he never came out of Egypt, except maybe
Except after
when
he died.
when he died, they buried him in Machpelah.
Right.
But
That's probably an important thing. to
that
consider.
word there is translated in my Bible as descendants, your descendants.
Oh, gotcha. So he's not saying you directly will come back here.
Yeah,
He's
I'll
just
bring your
saying
descendants.
Your posterity will return to this land,
Right,
like you as a nation,
exactly.
something like that. Yeah,
Right.
that makes sense. Will surely bring thee up again, and Joseph shall put his hand upon thine eyes.
So, right, so there was going to be that reunion that was unlike any other human reunion probably in
Yeah.
history.
Yeah, imagine thinking your child was dead, and then meeting them some 20 years later again, and
Right. And he's not just a normal person. He's
yeah,
a,
he's an exalted person. so
he's
to
an
speak.
absolutely in charge person. So,
Yeah, he's basically the king.
yeah,
Basically. Well, that's an interesting parallel too to Christ and the Father, is that Joseph is technically
so,
the son, like the second in command to Pharaoh in the sense, and he probably sits at the right hand of Pharaoh,
right.
something to that effect. Interesting consideration there.
Yeah, Joseph's the president, Pharaoh's the prime minister.
Right. One of the interesting things about this promise as well, when he says, and Joseph shall put his hand upon thine eyes, I think was both a confirmation for him that this is legit and that Joseph is alive, kind of just one more piece of evidence for him that you're going to see Joseph first of all. But apparently this actually deals with like a death rite, the idea of closing a person's eyes.
Mhm.
So essentially what he's telling him is that, not only will you see Joseph, but he'll be the one to carry out this, process in your passing of, like the closing of your eyes. And it was a rite that was practiced with high, basically a very close family or very close friends were the ones that like had this kind of honor of like closing your eyes in death,
Mhm. Wow.
So it was kind of just I think a way to encourage him that he would get to be there and that his son Joseph would get to carry out this rite.
Right.
Verse 5. And Jacob rose up from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried Jacob their father and their little ones and their wives in the wagons which Pharaoh had sent to carry him. And they took their cattle and their goods, which they had gotten in the land of Canaan, and came into Egypt, Jacob and all his seed with him.
Another thought is with all the provisions that Pharaoh had sent, and of course, with Joseph's authority, they could have decided to go anywhere,
Right.
right?
I mean,
And-
just been like, oh,
well, they could have decided to go anywhere, locate in another region, and Joseph, and sent the word to Joseph, come over here and meet us.
Mhm.
Because they knew that Egypt was kind of a heathen nation.
Right.
And so the idea of going down into a heathen nation, and I think this is one of the reasons.
They were already living amongst a heathen nation, so I can't imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, they had their own wilderness plot.
Right,
but,
right, exactly. But so I'm sure there was a little bit of apprehension about, coming into an area when you think about.
And probably just hoping that nobody there has heard about you
Well,
and your sons.
They also had the experience not too far back of Abraham and Lot.
Right.
Lot fixed his tent towards Sodom, and look what happened. His whole family was basically eliminated.
Well, you know,
And
what's
correct.
kind of funny is you actually see pretty much that same thing play out in the future, in the sense that the time they spent in Egypt, they become so corrupted that in leaving, they're kind of
Over
know,
time, yeah.
divorced from this whole principle to the point where they have to be reminded of the laws and things have to be reiterated and retrained, and to the point where that generation doesn't even make it to the promised land.
Right, well, when,
You know,
exactly.
So
When you're-
everybody who
Everybody. who was
everybody
there
who
left.
pitchfork Sodom,
Exactly,
you know,
exactly. So
started to
we
train a whole new generation to inherit the promised land.
promised land, sure.
So that almost has interesting parallels to the new wineskins concept as
Right.
well.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, so, but anyway, he gets the confirmation from God. I will go down.
I will make
with
of you a mighty nation there.
Yeah, I'm gonna make you a mighty nation.
And thank goodness God didn't give you all the details. You know, if he told him,
Yeah,
go ahead, go down, and
You could-
you know, I'm gonna enslave your people for
yeah, for a couple hundred years.
for a couple hundred years, and
Yeah,
then we'll deliver them, and then they're gonna give me a lot of trouble in the future.
but it was gonna take though, many successive generations to become a mighty nation, because you've got, they estimate, what, probably at least 1 million Jews
People,
coming
yeah.
out, and then maybe
Part of the
another
mixed
million mixed
multitude.
multitudes, so yeah, so it's gonna take many generations to develop.
And even then, like, you know, you think the term mighty, like they left unarmed essentially.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like a mighty nation. What do you mean by
But-
mighty? Like,
You're following the cloud by day and the fire by night, so you know God is
that
in
would have been a
charge.
sight to behold.
Yeah,
Anybody out there watching, you know, scouting and just seeing this fire.
yeah, and
Follow these
I've
people.
driven that route that they took, and it is kind of a desolate wilderness, and you would definitely really relish the shade.
Some clouds
You would definitely relish
and
the
some heat
shade
at night
and some heat at night, absolutely. So,
and some miraculous preservation. Of the
and you
shoots.
couldn't miss not following it. It's like, you know, this huge thing. I mean, it's like a big sky country, we would call it out there, you know. You have nothing but the dirt and the sky.
What's interesting too is it has also a striking physical parallel to the idea of what following God is like. That there's an aspect of visibility, you know, where you can kind of see the path and see where he's going, where he's leading you.
Right.
And as long as you stay within it, you're protected from the elements and you're safe. But anyone who decides, I'm sure, to venture out of that has to deal with the heat
Right.
in the day and the cold at night.
Sure.
You know, so there's definitely an element of that about staying close to his presence to, you know, to be there, because it wasn't like he just spread himself over the world.
Right. So his sons and his sons' sons with him, his daughters and his sons' daughters, you know, and all his seed brought he with him into Egypt. And then from verse 8 on down to what we're looking at, 27, 28.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are basically all the detail of all the sons. I don't know if you want to take the time to read through all of that or not.
What we can do is we can kind of talk, because, you know, thinking about how interesting names are,
Mhm.
I thought it'd be kind of cool to just go
Okay.
through a quick summary of the
Sure.
names, because the meanings of all their names, not even just the main people, but it seems, and I haven't quite decoded, quote unquote, what it all would mean. So maybe that's with the help of the collective consciousness here can put together as kind of a story that these names tell.
Mhm.
So I'll just kind of run through those names,
Okay,
starting with the sons and then their children.
right.
Reuben means see a son, you know, like behold a son.
Mhm.
His son Hanok means dedicated or experienced or to train up a child. It actually is pretty much the same as the name Enoch, so it also means initiated.
Right.
Phalu means distinguished or set apart or severed. Hezron means a courtyard or an enclosed vineyard, something to that effect. Carmi means my vineyard or vine grower or my gardener. And then you got Simeon, which means hearkening or listening attentively. His son Jemuel, which means the day of God or the day of El. Jamin, which means the right hand or right side. Ohad, which means unity or union. Jakin, which means he establishes or he will set up. Zohar means brilliance or radiance. Shaul means asked for or inquired of.
He's the son of the Canaanite.
The Canaanitish woman, yeah. Then you got Levi, which means attached or joined. Son Gershon, which means exile or stranger. Kohath, which means gathered or assembly. Merari, which means bitterness or sadness. I guess that's close to, yeah. Then you got Judah, which means praise or thanksgiving. Son which means watchful or awake.
And and Onan were, they died before they ever got there.
Yeah, that's a shame. Well, and Onan means strong or vigorous. Sheila means sent or the one who has been sent. Pharez means breach or breakthrough. Zerah means shining or radiant. Then we've got Issachar, which means he brings a reward or hire. Tola, which means crimson worm or scarlet. Suva, which the meaning of which was uncertain, but could be related to a sprout or a blossom. Job, which means persecuted or hated. Shimron,
Wow.
which means watchful or guarded. It's interesting, right? Like these names for their children. Zebulun, dwelling or habitation. Sered, which means fear or escape. Elon, which means oak tree.
Sure doesn't mean Tesla.
Yeah. Well, it's become a little more synonymous now with that, but Jalil, which means God waits or God hopes. We got Gad, which means fortunate or good fortune. Ziphion, the meaning of which is uncertain, but might be related to watchtower or watchman. Hagi, which means festive or festive pilgrim. Shuni, which means sleeping or resting. Esben, which meaning of which is also uncertain, but could be related to abandonment or forsaking. And Eri, which means my watcher or my guardian. Eridai, which means my wild donkey or my mule. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just thinking, like, when these kids were born, they must have had some obvious temperament that they were like, this is your name for sure. Areli, which is the lion of God or lion-like. And so I guess one of the potential parallels that I was drawing just from the names of the main sons, because I feel like all the ones in between also have interesting stories to add to the overall arc. But if all the sons of Seth and so on, had all those significant meanings, I imagine the 12 tribes all have pretty significant meanings as well. So Reuben, of course, meaning a son, to me could be represents the promise of the Redeemer. Behold the son, a son is promised. Simeon, to hearken or to listen, the God who hears his people, hears their wants and things like that. Levi, meaning attached or joined, God would join himself to humanity and become a bridge between, or the intercessor between God and man.
Right.
Judah means praise or thanksgiving, which of course is also the lineage of the Messiah, but also the one in whom gives us reason to praise. We got Zebulun, which means dwelling or habitation. He came and dwelt among us. Issachar, he brings a reward or hire. He came to bring us the greatest gift and the greatest offering. Dan, he judges or he will judge, which means I was interpreting that as either you could maybe take that in the idea that Christ would be judged.
Right. And also is the judge.
And also is the judge. So you can look at it from both perspectives. Naphtali means my struggle or wrestling. I thought maybe that could be Jesus's struggle in Gethsemane and his wrestling with, the reality before him of what he was trying to accomplish and, the uncertainty. Of course, you've also got the idea of mankind and God wrestling You know, Gad means fortunate or good fortune, which, you know, could be the result of that struggle and that suffering.
Yep.
The blessing and the good, you know, salvation. Asher means happy or blessed, which is what we receive when we receive that gift of good fortune.
Yep.
Joseph means he will add or he will increase. You know, which I guess could be just part of that, the idea that eternal life and, you know, the renewed reality of things. You know, Manasseh and Ephraim are in there too, but Manasseh means to cause to forget, which is what happens when we go to the earth made new. You know, and
Right.
Ephraim means to be fruitful or to bear fruit. So we, you know, we forget the misery of the sinful life
Right.
when we are translated into that life. And of course, Benjamin means son of the right hand, which symbolizes Jesus in his exalted position at the right hand of the Father. Or it could also be talking about us, you know, being brought in as sons of God as well.
Sure.
So those are just some interesting food for thought points. There's obviously a lot of interesting directions you can
Right. So
take.
just like the patriarchs from Adam on to before the flood down to Methuselah,
Right.
they tell the story of judgment to come,
Yeah.
and basically a recounting of Earth's history. This,
Just in some names.
yeah, just in some names. This does this very same thing,
Yeah. And so,
but focuses on the plan of salvation more directly.
yeah, that's what it seems.
Yeah.
And you know, like thinking of just the names of the sons, right? Like the one potential application there was the sons of Reuben, which was, you know, Reuben means to, you know, behold a son. You know, his first one is called dedicated or initiated. It's like, which sounds like it would describe a characteristic of Christ. You know, and Phalu means distinguished or set apart. Also
Right.
could mean severed, you know, is severed from his father, you know, that connection essentially.
Right.
Hezron, you know, courtyard and enclosure. I mean, there's Jesus is the enclosure.
Sure. So there's a lot there just in the meanings of the
He
names.
is the vine. So I mean, my vineyard, my vine grower.
Right. Typically, people would either skip over that part,
Yeah,
Because
boring names.
boring names, but
But it seems like it almost tells the story much more clearly than you know, than some others.
it's a
have to.
summary. It's a summary of the story, really, right?
Yeah, it's one of those weird things where you could literally just read essences of these stories, and anybody reading it in Hebrew could potentially actually pick up on this meaning more obviously than anyone who just reads it in
Right.
English.
And verse 27 there says that the sons and grandsons, etc., which were born him in Egypt were 2 souls. All the souls of the house of Jacob, which came into Egypt, were 70.
70 people.
70 souls.
Not too bad, is it?
Yeah, I mean that's not a mighty great nation at all, but I mean he's using that as the seed to plant that in the land of Goshen,
Right.
that it would become a mighty nation.
Planting the seed of a nation in fertile land.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's exactly what was going on.
So verse
I also think that in the description of the names, it provides you with a visualization and a way to solidify the character of Christ and how that foundation was crucial to be laid upon which the nations would come. Like they would come from that, but in order for it to be perpetuated, there needed to be a solid foundation on which it was built, and those names kind of lend credence to that fact.
Yeah, of course, you know, and we review this in its entirety, but as people are living it out, I'm sure when people were pregnant and they were considering a name, they talked about the meaning of,
right. Well, like
you
when,
know,
when
should we name
Rachel-
it this, should we name this person this or this person that?
Well,
Well,
Rachel had-
let's look at the meanings.
Yeah, like when she was dying, giving birth to Benjamin.
Benoni.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just like, and they were like, let's not call him that.
Right.
Well, let's get close. We'll, you know, call him Benjamin.
Well, so there's a lot of inspiration that's obviously taking place along the way in the development, and they may not have been able to see the bigger picture like we can. We can look back and look at the bigger picture and see a real display of the plan of salvation
Right.
or the character of Christ is the saying there. But along the way, I'm sure they had to maybe consider various names and what their meanings were. So
Right.
it's just incredible that they would pick those,
Yeah.
the ones that come together.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there was an essence of divine inspiration on some level. The name picking was just a little too uncanny to have been some, it's not the weird arbitrary names that we pick. They're all like very significant and they seem to have a very linear story, which is what's so interesting about it.
Right, and who's sent out as the point man?
The point man.
Yeah. Next verse.
Oh,
Judah is sent as the point man to go and to meet with Joseph, right?
mhm,
To direct him to the land of Goshen.
right.
So I see that as very significant also.
That
Judah.
Judah who leads them to the
Promised land.
fertile land.
The fertile land,
Yeah.
If you will.
Yeah.
It had been land that had been promised. So to
Right.
them, it was the promised land.
Right.
So
Yeah,
you
for
have,
it was the promised land of their generation.
so you have Judah leading them to that.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's verse 29. And Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to meet Israel his father to Goshen and presented himself unto him. And he fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while.
Mm.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be
Absolutely.
one heck of a reunion.
Now, the other thing that had to be kind of interesting is that he looks like an Egyptian now.
Right.
He doesn't look like anything that
I
Jacob can
kinda-
remember.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if he actually like changed his clothes or anything to kind of look more familiar to him, or if he just stuck with his royal
I think he
Egyptian
probably
stuff.
kept his royal stuff on because that was his stamp of authority in a sense. I've got
Right.
the Pharaoh's
You
medallion.
could tell who he
on,
was, and
Right, anybody could see, this is,
Some
this
important
is a
person.
dignitary of state, right? This is the head of state right here.
Right.
I don't think he changed his clothes.
Yeah, that would make sense that he would just stay as he was. Just seeing together, it would have been crazy. Verse 30. And Israel said unto Joseph, Now let me die, since I have seen thy face, because thou art yet alive.
Now that right there, that verse right there is almost prophecy. It doesn't say, and Jacob said unto Joseph. This
Right.
isn't dad talking to his long lost son.
And it is interesting that he keeps flipping
Back
every
and
now
forth.
and again the
Right.
names.
This is Israel, right? Now, now let me die, since I have seen thy face. In other words, if the Jews had recognized the face of Jesus, if they had recognized the Messiah, they would have learned how to die to self. That was the whole purpose.
Wow.
They were so self-centered, right? They were so self-centered. I mean, when you read through Desire of Ages, I'm rereading Desire of Ages right now, and it is absolutely astounding how the Jews puff themselves up and place themselves up here in total misunderstanding and misinterpretation of who the Messiah would be. And yet, even when the Messiah was standing in front of them and displaying every aspect of his divinity,
Other than
They're
short
like-
of just showing
like,
us God.
you're taking some of our attention away. See, this is all a selfish
What's
response.
going to happen to the tithes and all?
This is a selfish response, right? You're taking the prestige and the honor that we deserve, but they didn't deserve it, right?
Right.
This is a prophecy right there. They, this was like, as Israel develops as a nation, and with the expectation that the Messiah is going to this is the forerunner, almost like John the Baptist collectively of the Messiah. They need to learn to die to self.
And as a nation.
You see that, and it's very clear when you read through Desire of Ages, if they had embraced that, they would have been the pinnacle of the world.
Well, once you
And
see,
the message would have gone to the world.
this is also kind of like a parallel to the resurrection itself, like seeing Jesus alive. And then, the message to the disciples and all was pretty much that, you need to die to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
That's the message of the gospel, really. Dying to self that Christ might live, that he has control of your will, and he's your Lord. He's not only
Right.
your Savior, but he's your Lord. He's only going to be your Lord if you dethrone self.
Right.
He's only
Right. Yeah, and he, and here he is standing before them, having suffered as a slave, as Christ did, basically.
right.
And now he's in an exalted position, and he's directing the way to the promised land.
Yeah,
So I mean, yeah, a lot of very obvious parallels there. Verse 31. And Joseph said unto his brethren and unto his father's house, I will go up and show Pharaoh and say unto him, my brethren and my father's house, which were in the land of Canaan, are come unto me. And the men are shepherds, for their trade hath been to feed cattle, and they have brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have. And it shall come to pass when Pharaoh shall call you, and shall say, what is your occupation? That ye shall say, thy servant's trade hath been about cattle from our youth, even until now, both we and also our fathers, that ye may dwell in the land of Goshen. For every shepherd is abomination unto the Egyptians.
That's kind of an interesting thing too. I know that Egypt was kind of the superpower of the day then,
Mhm.
and there was a sophistication. It always seems like it always seems like when these nations become kind of sophisticated and progressive, that they look down upon
Creates a peasant class.
the peasant. Well, no, I wouldn't say the peasant class, but the working class.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm just putting it in those terms because that's kind of how it is. Like
Yeah.
you've got like upper tier royalty, wealth, people who don't have to go out and grub in the fields or tend to cattle and,
Right.
because it's messy business dealing with.
But then,
livestock.
but then it is those people
Who put the
working
food on
for
the table.
7 years to store up all the grain,
Right,
saves the kingdom.
right,
It's not the progressive science, right?
right.
It's not the philosophy, right? It's not anything but pure logic and a heads up that this is what we need to do. Somebody that I mean, obviously Joseph had the ability, the supervisory ability to organize all of that. And just like at Saqqara, there's the grain bins. There are other cities around Egypt that have yet to be, grain bins have yet to be discovered around Egypt
Right.
that he established.
When, another aspect to this, because I thought it was a little interesting that this concept was they were considered an abomination unto the Egyptians.
Abomination, right, exactly.
And I did a little bit of research on it.
Yet
and-
they're the ones that saved the kingdom. Right.
Well,
I wonder if they got even a thank you.
there's a couple potential reasons why they would say that. And one was for potential socioeconomic type
I mean,
reasons. like-
the aristocracy of the day
Mhm,
worshiped the sun, Ra.
right. Yeah, well, they also had some different animals they worshipped as well, of course, different gods that represented animals. But one of the potential reasons for this feeling the Egyptians had, which is interesting to consider as well, because this same thing, this same kind of prejudice seems to be carried on to Israel when they're leaving Egypt. Not necessarily about shepherding, but about just this thing about elitist.
Well, you think the mixed multitude brought that?
Well, probably. I mean, it seemed like it corrupted the whole multitude, whether it was just the mixed or what, but
Mhm. So you're saying that there was an elitist group that was controlling and running Egypt, and they just kind of looked down their noses at the working class people.
that was just one of a collective amount of reasons. The one that seems the most probable, I'm just sharing the ones I remember reading about. That was one that it just dealt with basically the development of class systems.
Mhm.
People who, were at this upper tier of society, kind of looking down on the smelly goat farmer, just because it's messy business. Another was for potential economic reasons, was that Egypt wasn't primarily an economy of livestock, but of agriculture because of the Nile and things like that, that they were
Right, but
heavily-
agriculture produces the people out in the field working.
Right, but this is about the shepherds more in particular, not
Cattle.
just the
So maybe the cattle,
herders.
maybe the cattle was being more revered, like in India today.
Well, that was another of the reasons, was that maybe they didn't
The
agree
cattle is sacred, so if you're out there as a shepherd,
making money slaughtering your god.
Right, and something like that.
That was another potential reason. The one that I found perhaps the most compelling was the historian Methone, whatever his name is, had written that his opinion on one of the reasons that they didn't like shepherds was because in times past, Egypt had been ransacked and attacked by nomadic barbarians,
Right.
basically people who just lived out and shepherded
Left the bad taste in their
left a
mouths.
bad taste. Yeah, set fire to Egypt and tried to destroy a bunch of stuff. And so he was saying basically that this is one of the reasons they don't regard them, is because it's like these people just come from nowhere out in the fields and they just want what we have. They want our society, they want our treasure, they want our stuff.
And you believe that this kind of attitude carried over even to the tribes of Israel?
I think mostly in light of how they viewed themselves. You know, this idea, of course, they end up worshiping cows. That's one interesting thing. But the other thing that I'm mostly thinking of this idea that they come up with this system of it's Jew and Gentile. You know, you're the filthy outsider.
Right.
And they almost seem to have developed a sense. Huh?
Always divided.
Yeah, that there was even this idea that like, even though God's purpose was to bring the world to know him through them.
Well, a perfect example, adding a bit of specificity to your,
Just a bit.
to your theory there.
Right.
When Jesus was born in Bethlehem, who were the ones that actually witnessed the birth? It wasn't the people that had the writings and the books that told them when and where. It wasn't those guys,
Right.
right? Because they had developed a misinterpretation and they had a whole different expectation. We're not looking for a little
We're looking
babe in
for
the
King
manger.
David.
We're not looking for a babe in the manger. And so God has to send the message of the birth to shepherds in the field.
Yeah, to the lowly
Shepherds
shepherds.
in the field. And of course, they go and they witness, of course, the greatest gift to humanity, right?
Right.
They witness that. And then they start obviously talking about it. Eventually word gets back to the Sanhedrin, right?
The Messiah has been born
Messiah's been born. And they discount it immediately
because of who brought the report.
because who brought the report? They say,
They've been out there tripping.
they're
the
out
field.
there, drinking whatever in the field, watching their sheep.
However the case were.
They
Obviously, you come with a message like that, you must be on something.
must be on some poppy or something. But anyway, God would
But the
never.
other thing is that the credit wouldn't go to them.
Exactly. There you go.
In
That's
their
the idea.
arrogance, in their
Yeah, God-
arrogance, to go, well, hey, it can't possibly be credible because it didn't come from our lips. It
Yeah,
came
they
from
would, their attitude was, God will never bypass us to give such a significant message to some lowly shepherds in the field.
Sounds like a lot of politicians.
And especially angels wouldn't appear before you and sing.
So-
all this, you know.
So to ensure that they would not add any credence to the story, they wouldn't even send dispatch a group of priests to Bethlehem to check it out for themselves. Instead, 2 years later, here come the wise men from the east. And now in fact, it says in Matthew there,
Basically
all-
some dignitaries.
all Jerusalem is astir. Oh, no, it says trouble. All Jerusalem is troubled. Because now the king is troubled, thinking that he's got a competitor now, and this is why the whole thing happened down there with the kids being killed. I mean, all because they wouldn't believe the shepherds.
So God sends another witness.
Yeah, so it's a crazy.
What's interesting to consider as well is, I guess, how long the shepherds might have lived after this event. Because I'm just thinking for Matthew or anyone else to have recorded it, they either
Knew some of the
knew
shepherds.
somebody who, yeah, they either knew somebody who said they witnessed this or got to talk to somebody. Or maybe, maybe it was just told to Mary and Mary just passed the information along. You know, that's also possible.
Yeah.
But it'd be
Well,
interesting to
If you're a
consider.
shepherd out in the field, and I know Scott, and he's been in Turkey, and I've been in Turkey, I've seen shepherds out in the field like 5 and 6 years of age. Now these guys probably were a
Right.
little older
Right.
because they were
Old enough
they were
to be-
contemplating the prophecies in the Messiah's coming, and that's what the
What if
angel.
they were teenagers, young
Yeah,
people
just
instead of
teenagers.
old people?
Yeah, and what if they weren't trans? If they were just normal.
What if their pronoun was he, him?
Yeah, it was he and him. So anyway,
Yeah, and how they allow them to go into Goshen? Why wasn't Goshen already occupied by the
I
Egyptians?
always had that question. I
It's always
always
the most choice portion of the country. Was it a national park back then? Park,
I mean,
they couldn't
you gotta
move there
wonder-
until the president said, it was okay?
That was considered Upper Egypt, even though it was the lowland. Whereas,
No,
where,
Delta, yeah,
Lower Egypt was the highland, which is kind of a weird thing.
yeah.
But,
This is in the middle of the famine, right? So
yeah,
it's always possible that at this point, there wouldn't have been any particular reason to be there. And that maybe they used it for agriculture, for
It's possible,
farming.
it's possible that's where a lot of that grain grew that they had been
I'm sure,
storing, but now there was
absolutely.
nothing there.
Right, so now it's like, well, now it may as well be pasture land because nothing's growing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I always wondered that, Scott, same thing. Why wasn't that well inhabited to start with? I am really guessing that there had to be some people out there already.
I don't know, I
Sure.
think.
Because a mixed
For Pharaoh
multitude.
to have given it to them, I suspect it was part of the Pharaoh's
A lot.
property. And he probably used it for growing things and.
Or it could have been that some people had already sold it to the Pharaoh,
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
whatever,
That's true, because they sold it as they began to.
But that was that was years after the, which.
Or alternatively, Joseph could have just kept it in the back of his mind going, well, if this famine is gonna be widespread, maybe I ought to cordon off the section that I think my family could really use.
He didn't have any plan of knowing his family was coming.
Well, not that we're
Well,
told.
and let's remember, God preserved that land because he knew he had to get them there to make them a mighty nation. And that's the whole bottom line of the whole story. Getting them there. Anyway, our time is expired, and we're gonna let Elijah. close this out.
Surprisingly, we didn't get through it.
No, we just got to 47.
Just
It's a
finished.
good time.
We talked a lot.
Always a lot in there. Always a lot in there.
Well, the name for what was so interesting, is because we always gloss over that stuff because it seems boring, but it's like it has so much information when you just look at what their names mean.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, we'll go ahead and close out and pick it up next week. Father, we thank you so much for the Sabbath, for the beautiful weather and all the wonderful blessings you give. We ask that you continue to help us and to lead us and provide for us, and that you'll help us to be more like your Son every day, and to be the people that you have called us to be. And bless the food and our time together as a family. Continue to help us to lean on you for everything and to learn how to depend on you more fully. This we ask and pray in the name of your Son.
Amen. Amen. Well, thanks, everybody, as always, for being here, and we appreciate that and your thoughts and questions. And we'll look forward to catching up with you again next Saturday. Same time, same place. Look forward to seeing you then. Chapter 47, we'll dig into that.
All right.
So God bless.
God bless you guys too.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
And we don't have to leave now, we're just gonna turn off the recording.
Ah.
If anybody wants to chit chat, we could do that, after church fellowship.
Hobnobbing around the water fountain, right?
Hobnobbing.
Hobnobbing? It's hobnobbing.
I was about to say,
It's hobnobbing.
depends on
It's
whether you're.
electronic, we're not
Hobnobbing.
hobnobbing, so we're hobnobbing because it's electronic.
On a positive note, I'm actually meeting with a pastor of a small church about 45 minutes from where I live to do a little presentation on the discoveries. He's interested in finding
Nice.
out about all the discoveries. So I'm going to go to him and share all that information with him, and maybe he'll invite me back to do a presentation to his entire congregation. I'm not sure.
Very good.
Oh, great.
Very nice.
I think the Lord's gonna open a lot of doors in the coming months.
Yeah, the time seems appropriate for such.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool.
Let us know how
Yeah,
it
I'm
goes.
looking forward to that. I haven't done an in-depth presentation to anyone in some time now. I talk to people I fly with all the time, and I hand them one of the Discovery newsletter handouts oftentimes, and oftentimes I get it handed right back to me, but I share the information and see where God's Holy Spirit takes it from there.
You have to start stuffing them in all the plane seats in the back with the pamphlets.
Right, yeah. I'll be back there stuffing the packets as the cleaners are going through the aisles and cleaning everything. I can be putting one each in all the seat back pockets. That's right.
Are you still flying? You still flying full time?
Yeah.
Cool.
How long till you retire?
Well, I'm going to keep pressing on to the 65. So that's currently the maximum age is 65, and I'm
Is it?
61 and a half.
Yeah, they
now, so
actually give you
you know, 3.5 more years, but they're already trying to push the max up to 67 now, another additional 2 years. Not that I would go to that long, but
Right.
Congress just approved it, but it's got to go through a whole lot of other hurdles before it would be officially approved. And
Right.
it's not a full approval. It's like if you're between 65, 67, there'll be restrictions. Like you can't do certain flights. You can't fly any international flights, and there's some other stipulations in there. I'm not sure what they all are yet because this is still just kind of just getting started and being reviewed and all that. But yeah, so they're trying to push it because they're having a hard time finding pilots. They keep lowering the bar for minimum requirements in order to get people to, you know, guys and gals to fill the seats in the flight.
Really, it's interesting. So there's a shortage, huh?
There's a shortage.
What school?
It's a pretty much the airlines are kind of duking it out, trying to get, you know, steal pilot candidates from one another. And
Much like what happened in the medical profession with all the doctors getting out when they saw what was happening.
yeah, the
Have to
shortage.
go to flight school. I can just name my price.
Yeah.
There's some that left early retirement during COVID in the pilot sector. So they were kind of short when things turned around and everybody was flying all over the place and all the planes were full. So yeah, all of our flights have been pretty much 99% or 100% occupied. All the flights I've flown this month. I don't
I've heard a couple of people have really bad horror stories about getting
Single
stuck
plane.
where the plane was full and they couldn't get on,
Overbooking. Yeah.
overbooked.
Yeah, the airports are definitely jam packed.
Someone else taking my place because I'll never fly again
Not on this side.
on this side of heaven.
You'll fly, you'll take the flight when God comes. If the price comes
Yeah,
back, you'll take
I'll
that.
meet y'all in the air.
Yeah.
And that
That
day.
one's straight up. That flight goes straight up.
Straight up, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, about that.
straight into space.
That'll be something else.
Take you out to the real space station.
Yeah, well, you guys have a great week. And have a wonderful remaining Sabbath hours.
Yeah.
You guys too.
You. Talk to you
Bye for
later.
now.
All right.
Like you guys later.
Bye.
He's right here.
At the bottom right.
Yeah.